coming up on rhetorically defective.
Close your eyes. I want you to imagine what a Destiny fan looks like, okay? Close your eyes and open them.
On the 5th, we're going to shut down the White House.
So let's say we want to shut down the White House and make sure nobody goes in and out, right? We would need to have map the White House and know every access point so we knew we could blockade it.
Hey, if you have TDS, raise your hand. That's what I thought. The guy that was talking about surrounding the White House and shutting down the White House is a part of an organization called Shut Down DC.
And I work with Shutdown DC, and I work with Shutdown DC, and I work with Shutdown DC, also one of the hosts of this program, and federal employee myself.
Federal employees are affiliated with the organization Shutdown DC. Let that stew for a little bit of what the left is allowed to do in terms of their organizing and their affiliations and their loyalties. So, Destiny and Andrew Wilson had a debate as to whether or not January 6th was an insurrection. Now, this is 3 years ago, and we're still having this debate and arguing about it, miraculously enough, right around election time, and it's just gonna be relitigating the same thing over and over again. Mind you, Destiny was a person that was honest about the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting. When all the other lefties were lying. He watched all the other lefties lie about Kyle Rittenhouse and he argued with all of them, okay? He knows right and wrong, he knows, but he needs Trump to be an insurrectionist because then he can't run for president again. I mean, the Democrat Party's strategy right now is to call Republicans weird.
Some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
These guys are just weird. That's who they are.
As weird and creepy as J.D. Vance.
Super weird idea from J.D. Vance.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's quite weird. They're just plain weird.
Just plain weird. Just plain weird.
That stuff is weird. They come across weird and then they start being weird. Yeah, they're weird.
Being a really weird.
He's such a weirdo.
Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate, they're weird. Deeply and profoundly weird.
They are weird.
These Republicans just being weird, it's just weird. It's really weird.
Republican weirdness goes even deeper.
He said a lot of things that are weird, a weird style that he brings, weird policies. Let's start with the weird thing, because it is a thing.
Just plain weird.
What was weird was talking about Diet Mountain Dew. Who drinks Diet Mountain Dew?
You ever seen the guy laugh? That seems very weird to me that an adult can go through 6.5 years of being in the public eye. If he has laughed, it's at someone, not with someone. That is weird behavior.
Weird and cultish.
These are weird people on the other side.
He kind of doubled down on his weird ideas.
I think weird is probably generous.
Simply weird. These guys are just plain weird.
Vance as weird?
You know, as the campaign said, weird.
It really is just plain weird.
J.D. Vance, plain weird.
No,
I mean, I don't know how else you could read it.
Weird. It is kind of weird.
We're not afraid of weird people.
The other side, they're just weird. Why are you being so weird?
Vance has done something more extreme, more weird.
No matter what kind of weird stuff they keep saying.
Trump and Vance are just weird, in addition to being dangerous to democracy.
That's the weird part that's the most engaging.
Whom he addressed as my beautiful Christians, which was super weird.
Weird tech bro, J.D. Vance.
He's a weird guy.
J.D. Vance, uneasy and sort of weird.
Frankly, for lack of a better word, that he's weird.
So they're kind of running on fumes. So these are not serious people. So I'm going to talk about the debate a little bit, but I'm also going to talk about what I think is a little more pressing of an issue. It's something that adds a little bit of context to the discussion around January 6th and whether or not it's an insurrection.
Andrew Wilson and Destiny. Today I'm going to be hosting a debate between them on was January 6th an insurrection?
There was an amendment to the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, and Section 3 of that amendment basically goes on to say that any prior oath taker that has engaged in or aided in an insurrection is no longer allowed to hold office, essentially. Now, the question that we come to today is trying to define what is an insurrection. And while in modern times, it seems like an insurrection is a term left to a dictionary or a term left to internet debaters, at the time that the amendment, the 14th Amendment, was framed, what was an insurrection was pretty well understood. An insurrection includes 4 vital elements.
So Destiny is making a fatal mistake here. Since his departure from reality, he's just surrounded by yes men now. He used to have a lot of pushback in his community, but now he's going very leftist, Vosh, Hassan, insular community. And so in that community, it's like, oh, they love the Constitution, so approach the insurrection from a constitutional standpoint. Now, the issue with that is that if you're taking something that's historical from over a century ago, you're going to run into rather vague, highly interpretive language. So in his mind, he's like, oh, I'm gonna have them dead to rights. I'm gonna pull up an amendment to the Constitution that says what insurrection is. He's so laser focused on like owning MAGA people that he's not realizing how easy it is to apply his definition to the months of BLM riots. So he's trying to isolate this as to one situation on January 6th when we have a wealth of examples to choose from the over a year. Like, the BLM riots were before January 6th, during January 6th, and after January 6th, all over the country. We'll be able to pull a few examples with this vague interpretation you're going to be providing.
One is an assemblage, meaning a group of people that have come together.
We'll just ignore that this is during a global pandemic where people weren't allowed to work or go to school. Hey, if you have TDS, raise your hand. That's what I thought.
Two is resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Any law or any law or
any law or interfering.
Interfering with the course of a government proceeding.
I'm not doing the research to find a clip. Maybe he's right. Maybe Black Lives Matter never interfered through assemblage. Think about like how old this law is where you're saying assemblage, not assembly. It's like archaic language. You know what? Maybe Black Lives Matter or leftists in general never assembled to stop a government proceeding. Maybe he's right.
Three is you have to do this by way of force or intimidation.
Yeah, this kid totally understands what he's doing right now. Hey, we doing thumbs up? No? All right. What are the odds he thinks he's a girl now? Anyway, intimidation. So what if we just get in this woman's face and shove our fists in the air and try to make her shove her fist in the air during a global pandemic? Don't worry though. NBC News informed us that Black Lives Matter protests haven't led to COVID-19 spikes. It may be due to people staying home. Pardon me for a moment, I have to get my screaming pillow.
If it was that easy the whole time, then why couldn't people go to school and work? If we can protest and it doesn't spread the virus, then why couldn't we just continue society as usual?
And four is it has to be through for a public concern or a public cause, not a private thing that one might be interested in.
Massive crowds swarming cities across the country are choosing social justice over social distancing.
I could be dead tomorrow if I walk on the street.
One would think she would think to herself, I could be dead if I walk on the street because of COVID. I mean, she's wearing a mask. But no, she thinks that if she's walking on the street, that a cop's gonna kill her during a global pandemic. Do you think possibly she may have been ideologically captured?
But these demonstrators see an America infected with injustice, too.
Are you worried about your safety? Yes, but the answer is that I'm worried about my safety to both of those viruses.
So the reason why he has his kid in his hands, and the kid can't go to like daycare or kindergarten or preschool, he can't do that, but he can drag his ass out to a protest and go, you know what, I'm protesting the virus of COVID and the virus of racism. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, this doesn't have anything to do with insurrection. And in a way, you're right. And that's my issue. They want you thinking about how Trump attempted a coup and tried an insurrection and wants to become a dictator. They want you caught up in what the right wing might do and their scary ideas and their words, while ignoring all the actions and material harm that the left has committed in the past few years. So let's not talk about the violence and actions of the left leading up to January 6th. They want to view January 6th in a vacuum and completely ignore how they let people protest, but they were fining businesses for trying to reopen and make money. They were charging people money to try to open their business and make money while having their businesses destroyed from protesters, costing them even more money. That'll probably piss people off for months and months and months, and then people that are more ethical, instead of antagonizing businesses, they went, our problem is with the people at the White House. Our problem is with the politicians. So we're gonna go to the politicians after months of not being able to work and just seeing protests, lighting things on fire, and the police aren't doing anything about it. We're gonna ignore months of that and just look at January 6th. The same people trying to give you a narrative of January 6th are the ones that were lying to you during COVID the entire time. So why would you trust their narrative of January 6th? This is the feeling. Do you feel fed up right now? That's how people felt when they went to the Capitol. A wide range of people. They weren't like in unison raising their fists like cult members like the BLM protests.
Nobody has been prosecuted for any insurrection by any definition. Destiny comes through and he gives us this list. He says 1, an assemblage. Okay. 2, resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Okay. 3, by force or intimidation. Okay. 4, for a public purpose. He has just outlined basically almost every single political riot I've ever heard of. That is what that is outlined. So let's see, an assemblage. This would cover a riot. A bunch of people assembling. Resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. That could be shutting down roadways for commerce. That could mean anything. By force or intimidating, if you have Black Lives Matter, other groups like this who are out there saying no justice, no peace, that would be very intimidating. And then for public purpose, very nebulous. All of this is completely nebulous language.
That's it. That's the whole debate. I don't know how this conversation went on for so long. It's Destiny is using a constitutional definition of insurrection, and Andrew Wilson is saying that that's so general and vague that we can apply that to other riots. That's it. That's the whole thing. There's 2 camps of thought. Destiny is correct, and Andrew Wilson is incorrect because he doesn't have a better definition, even though I thought a debate is that you both have the same definition of something and you argue based on that same definition. I didn't know what debate was. Make up a different definition until you're right. And then you think Andrew Wilson's correct because Destiny's definition is vague and does apply to many things. So Destiny just wants the concession that January 6th was an insurrection, and he will call other things an insurrection. But in his mind, he's like, aha, January 6th is an insurrection. But no, then you're just showing everyone that you don't care when the left does insurrections. You only care when the right does insurrections, just so Trump can't be president. That's it. That's the whole debate. Now let me get to the fun stuff.
Most riots just kind of like happen. It's pretty rare that they are planned in advance. And I think we all agree that if they are planned in advance, it takes on a much different character and arguably could call under it like different types of crimes. If people engage in rioting, it's not good. But if people are literally planning it out in advance, we are calling in a whole bunch of different crimes there than just the simple thing of calling a particular thing a riot.
On the 5th, we're going to shut down the White House.
So let's say we want to shut down the White House and make sure nobody goes in and out. Right, we would need to have mapped the White House and know every access point so we knew we could have blockade it. But then we would need more people to support that. So we might say Black Lives Matter Plaza and the African American Museum on the Mall Constitution are 2 public assembly sites, so we can quickly move large numbers into zones of potential conflict.
Oh, you want to know what that was? Oh, that's just activists planning to surround the White House and stage a coup if Donald Trump won the election. Oh yeah, this is before the election in 2020. Oh, you want proof of that? This is from a video that's still up on YouTube that was uploaded on November 2nd of 2020.
So we're talking about what would it take to surround the White House and have people do stuff. We can divide it up easily with affinity groups.
On the 6th, we're going to shut down larger parts of Washington, D.C. Congress is planning on coming to town and passing laws again and like having business as usual. And we're saying if we're in a coup, there's no time for business as usual.
I'm about to show you the level at which the left is allowed to plan and organize for political violence and overthrowing the government without it being called seditious conspiracy. Somehow, everything I'm about to show you is not considered conspiring or a coup or an insurrection or anything. They're not an organization. They're just a collection of organizers. Strap on your helmet, it's about to get pretty tarded. The guy that was talking about surrounding the White House and shutting down the White House is a part of an organization called Shut Down DC. They use strategic direct action to advance justice and hold officials accountable. In other words, surround the White House. Oh, but they didn't do it, they were just talking about doing it. until they do it. I wonder if we could see this coming, possibly. I wonder if we can possibly predict where there's going to be thousands of protesters set up. I wonder the people that are organizing this, that aren't a part of an organization. It's just a colluding set of organizations that somehow magically can make thousands of people show up to protest during a pandemic.
Is there a scenario that might play out that would cause us to all go and shut down an airport?
Members of Congress that are coming in, we're going to meet them at the airports or at Union Station and send them back to where they came from until we deal with the situation that we're in.
We're going to see potential fighting all over the country or in some hot spots, right? We've already seen that. And so how do we work together across the country to help support each other no matter where we are and to maximize our impact by doing similar things on similar days at similar time? We have to be willing to put our bodies on the line and take on some discomfort, sacrifice, risk in order to change things.
You hear about how, well, Trump told them to get together. Was there this level of colluding nationally across the country? They're talking about being in communication across the country to enact in political demonstrations. You know, the fiery but mostly peaceful? You know how they're like demonstrators, but the Jan 6th people, the grandma that walked in that trespassed, she's an insurrectionist. These people are just political organizers and activists. They're not insurrectionists. Show me this from the Proud Boys that got 22 years for the people that got seditious conspiracy. Open challenge, lefties. Show me this level of evidence of their coordination to overthrow the government, to affect political outcomes.
If there should be a coup, we should be clear. Like, it's got to go. Trump's got to go. In order to achieve what they did, they knew they had to take over important government buildings. I think we don't have a lot of experience taking over government buildings. And we might need to think about that. And I know, as I said earlier, how, we may find ourselves in the streets with people with different tactics than ours. But like, there may be some people that are willing to break the windows to get into the government buildings. Like, if that's what we need to do, then we shouldn't fight about that. Let's do that. Let's take over the buildings.
Wouldn't you be more likely to call January 6th an insurrection if you heard some chatter like that behind the scenes? This is just one scenario they're planning. They have maps of where people are going to be. Do you think it's a coincidence that thousands of people show up for protests? No, they're heavily organized across the country through NGOs and through government officials. You want to go there? Do you want to see how the feds are involved? Okay, I'll show you how the feds are involved. Here's a Zoom call titled Democracy Defense, a guide for federal workers, Wednesday, October 28th, 2020. Put together by Feds for Democracy and Democracy Kitchen.
So there's a lot going on right now, and as we're all aware, the election is now less than a week away. My name is Maddie Salzman. I'm a management and programs analyst in a federal agency and also a union member and former organizer.
I have worked in the U.S. government. I worked in the State Department for over 5 years.
As an attorney in the federal government, I am finding the chat suggestions very interesting, and I just do want to remind people that we lose our status as federal employees if we strike.
I am a federal employee, but I'm not part of the executive branch. I'm one of those quasi-government things that reports directly to Congress.
And I will pass it to Comrade Locke.
I'm Josh. It's nice to meet you all. I'm a federal employee for almost 5 years now.
I guess I'm Molly, and I've been a federal employee in a couple of different services for about 28 years, and I work in the national security community.
Hi guys, I am B. I use she, her pronouns. I am not currently a federal worker. However, I am in the process of searching for a new job and have been applying to a lot of federal jobs.
And I work with Shutdown DC, and I work with Shutdown DC, and I work with Shutdown DC, also one of the hosts of this program, and federal federal employee myself. Really happy to bring this here. We will be dropping links in the chat for the federal guide that you can refer to for more information.
Federal employees are affiliated with the organization Shut Down DC. Let that stew for a little bit of what the left is allowed to do in terms of their organizing and their affiliations and their loyalties. Mind you, everything I'm showing you is while Trump is president. This is before the 2020 election. So when we're talking about January 6th, everything I'm showing you is months before January 6th. That's kind of always left out of the conversation in terms of January 6th being an insurrection. They want to view January 6th in a vacuum and ignore everything leading up to it. I would too if I were them. I also love the intense focus as to whether or not January 6th was an insurrection. Like, Democrats could Holocaust half the country, and if it's not done, like, toward the federal government or toward federal property, they're gonna go, well, yeah, but it wasn't an insurrection. Like, I'm just showing you them attacking CNN during a pandemic, and they go, well, that's not an insurrection because it's at CNN, it's not at the federal government. Like, they could be raping dogs in the street and they go, well, that's just raping dogs, it's not an insurrection. They want you thinking of the idea of insurrection and completely ignoring all of the violence they're doing on the ground. Yeah, but that's just violence, that's not an insurrection. We have to be afraid of what Trump might do and what Trump wants to do. It's not like he was already the president and we don't already know what it's like when he's the president. No, but this time he's gonna do this. He's already been the president. Trump wants to do a coup. Trump wants to do a coup. They were already planning on calling it a coup on October 28th of 2020. Who's they? People usually ask that. Who's they? The Jew. I'm just kidding. It's the feds.
Totally agreed. In the shutdown DC conversations that I've been having, and that's not on the federal side, we also are often saying, like, call it a coup. It's a coup. Don't let anyone tell you it's not. Because the more you normalize that language, the more, like, it becomes apparent, and it's like most centrist folks in the government might start actually accepting that.
Yeah, and I think, I work on a project where I'm interacting on a daily basis with our politicals, and starting to call into question if we're in the midst of a coup, should we even be listening to our politicals because they are not here legitimately anymore.
So I'm more concerned with other things aside from whether or not January 6th was an insurrection. I'm more concerned with the obvious compromising and infiltration of commies. Anti-capitalist, anarchists, commies. Leftists, commies. They're commies. If you're contending with that, I have shown you 1% of the footage that I have. But let's shift gears for a second. Now that you've seen what I'm more concerned about, let's try and revisit the debate. But let's watch a Destiny fan watch the debate. Close your eyes. I want you to imagine what a Destiny fan looks like, okay? Close your eyes. All right, don't open them yet. Don't open them yet. And open them.
Who's going to make more and more? Yeah, I would say that was an insurrection.
Nobody in good faith anywhere is going to agree with you that if a bunch of hippies showed up to resist the marijuana law on federal property and then a few of them started a riot, that they would consider that insurrection against the United States. I don't believe you believe it. I don't believe your audience believes it. I don't believe anybody believes it.
Correctly, because this, I don't even know if this would satisfy the second point of like obstructing official government proceeding or with the fuck. Why I always forget the exact way to phrase it.
How do you feel now? Feel pretty bad about yourself, don't you? You had a completely different image in your head. And he just shattered your expectations. Then he opened his mouth and he proved you're wrong again. You couldn't imagine a Destiny fan would look and sound like that, could you? Listening to Destiny on 2x speed, like that information's even going into his head. But let me actually address what he's watching.
Now, to be fair to you, it is nebulous. I understand it's nebulous. But I'm also not the one who's making the affirmative claim. You are. So you're saying that if a bunch of fucking dope smoking hippies wanted to resist the federal law of being able to smoke marijuana on federal land, and they all showed up and they got stoned and then they started rioting, that would be a fucking insurrection?
If they went there with a common purpose, they were trying to resist the implementation or execution of a particular law. Yeah, theoretically it could.
Well, no, they're just resisting. right? They're just resisting a law. They're saying, we're here to protest the fact, man, that we can't smoke weed on federal property, man. So they all grab their blunts and they start toking up in protest, right? And then they start a fire.
What do you have?
And kick some stuff. And kick some stuff.
Do you think that...
hang on, I just want to make sure. You think...
It could be, yes.
That would be an insurrection?
The historical record, it could be, yes.
So if you vote blue no matter who, and you want Trump out at all costs, Destiny's concession probably isn't going to seem ridiculous to you. But if you're a person that values the English language and what words mean, reducing the word insurrection to hippies smoking weed on federal property and lighting fires, even though they're not trying to overthrow the government, as insurrection, is ridiculous. They, tell me if this feels familiar, will change the definition of words to get their way. I'm going to call this the rape in Sweden argument. When you look at the world and you're trying to find the countries that have the highest rates of rape, you'll see South Africa, which isn't surprising at all. What is surprising is to see Sweden at number 2. Now, obviously other countries aren't going to be reporting or really care about it, but how is Sweden number 2? Well, Sweden changed the legal definition of rape in 2018 to sex without consent, and I don't know how you have a without consent kit to test for it, but that's how they could inflate their numbers that high by changing the definition. That's what they're looking to do in this case, and I think the level of violence that comes from the left and the amount that it happens is way more damaging materially than the spooky idea of Trump putting people in camps and stuff like that.
Remember my opening statement. I said in my opening statement, this is going to become very broad, right? There's no way that we're not going to be able to call all sorts of things insurrections.
It only became broad because he made it broad, because he expanded the definition of official government proceeding to like literally anything the government does at all.
But think of how ridiculous it is to have a government proceeding be a condition of an insurrection. So what, if it's not during operating hours and people can just take over federal buildings? And then that's what, preventing a proceeding because they can't get inside the building? Well, what about blocking traffic? Then wouldn't that be preventing the proceeding if a person can't get to the building? So any prevention of someone getting into the building would then be affecting a government proceeding. I feel gay talking about this. This is so pedantic and stupid when I think we have larger issues going on with the communist infiltration of our federal government. Let me continue.
Weigh in on clearances and things is just a really great way of gumming up the works, because, you put forward information that, will be rejected because it's accurate. But then, I really think that the Bureau of Crop Dusting needs to take a look at this. Or, I can't send this in until I am sure that so-and-so has seen it and agrees. Or, don't you think the lawyers need to be involved? Because, and you can, gum stuff up for days or at least really irritate some people.
Federal employees just casually talking about how to gum things up or slow things down in terms of getting things done if they don't agree with something. Act inquisitive, act like you're asking questions. Oh, that example wasn't direct enough for you? Okay, let me give you another one.
And there was a lot of really good ideas about ways to just slow things down and use bureaucracy as part of that slowdown. And I'll put that whole list that we...
Bruh, look at how many people are in this call. There's I think 150 to 200 people just in this call. From all over the country.
Really quickly, we stayed pretty small scale. We didn't plan any actions, but people were talking. We also talked about that scenario too. There was also a lot of talking about bureaucratic slowdown, and especially pairing bureaucratic slowdown with vacation, with sick time.
Yeah, you know how a bunch of federal employees will just coordinate with each other that they're going to take sick time all at the same time or go on vacation at the same time? Sometimes it's like a Fed flu going around, everyone just happens to catch it.
The Fed flu struck many TSA and air controllers, threatening to shut down airports. That is a particular thing that we could all catch this winter. I understand that it's important to refuse the, quote, let the trains run on time for those who aren't able to strike. What would that look like in practical terms? What does it look like in practical terms to put, to slow the gears down in some ways or another?
At the Department of Labor, it takes the form of several rounds of the cost-benefit analysis for a new regulation. And when people were cheating on the numbers, a copy of that draft got leaked to the Daily Labor Report, and it got published and it got sent to a congressperson. And the Office of Inspector General opened an investigation on who was cheating on the numbers. So again, that's sort of a combination of tactics. It's making a really good paper trail. It's making sure that that document got out to someone who could make use of it. And then Congress getting the Office of Inspector General involved. It was really a way to stop that thing just in its tracks. And it worked really well. But it was a coordinated effort by a lot of people.
They're not insurrectionists. They just work in the federal government and they coordinate with each other to slow down certain legal processes and leak information in order to get their desired result. You know, democracy. Speaking of leaking, let's check in with Comrade Luck. The guy's name on Zoom is Comrade, and he's been a federal employee for 5 years, and he's just done with the federal government, so he's just leaking information left and right, and he doesn't care if he gets fired. He's already ready to move on, so he's just leaking all this information. I wonder if he's like radicalized by communism, possibly, where these federal employees get radicalized in the federal government and then they can just bounce around to other NGOs and nonprofit organizations and organizations that have a lot of outside funding that go to them in the form of resources to allow activists to show up by the thousands when they need them.
Comrade Luck, whose name I may be mispronouncing.
That's fine. I'm Josh. It's nice to meet you all. I'm a federal employee for almost 5 years now. It's not my life.
Yeah.
I just recommend everyone who works in the federal government, if you read the mainstream press, like who is covering your agency, who is working for ProPublica, who is working for Politico. They all have Signal accounts. Text them, leak everything you can, save your emails, I record these meetings, I send it over. And I can't believe I'm showing my face here, but I've been doing this for months.
So, I think I've provided enough evidence as to why we should look at other characteristics of January 6th and not just the same thing over and over again as if it's propaganda for the last 3 years. There's a lot of other factors that aren't discussed, like the Summer of Love with Black Lives Matter, how those escalating incidents combined with people not being allowed to work or go to school, but only protest if it was for the right cause. And for some reason, these people don't trust the system. It's not like there's many examples of the media colluding with Democrats in positions of power to push incorrect propaganda. I know this because Destiny used to expose all of the Democrat lies surrounding Kyle Rittenhouse and other events that were happening when communists were roaming the streets, getting a pat in the back and a nod of the head from Democrats in power. And the media at large, they collude with each other behind the scenes. I have hours and hours of footage that's way worse than what I've shown you. But we're gonna get there. I'm not just gonna whip it out and stick you with it on the first date. We gotta get to know each other first, in time. Stay safe, stay curious, have a good one.